There are 7 types of people who can quietly take down your entire business. They don't make a scene, they do it with a handshake and a smile. The scariest part, number 7 is probably sitting at your table right now and you don't even know it yet. Whether you're a Christian trying to build a faith-based brand or just a founder trying to survive, you need to watch out for these personality types. There's this guy in the Old Testament named Lot. Long before Solomon ever built a city or ran a single project, Lot made one decision that wiped out everything he had. He looked out at some land near Sodom, saw how green it was, saw the opportunity, and basically moved his whole operation toward it. Not even into it yet, just toward it. Got close enough, he probably told himself it was just business, just geography, nothing personal. Within a few chapters, his home was gone, his wealth was gone, his wife was gone, the years he'd invested just evaporated. People love talking about strategy, branding, growth hacks, the next platform, the next funnel. Almost nobody talks about who they're letting into the deal. And that decision, more than any of the marketing stuff, is usually what makes or breaks a few years of your life. Ever met someone who agrees with literally everything you say, loves the idea before you've even finished the sentence? That's the flatterer. And it's not a compliment, it's a strategy. They build you up so fast and so smooth that you stop checking the details because the details feel rude to question when someone's making you feel like a genius. You start to think, why would I need a lawyer to look at this? This guy clearly gets me. This guy sees something in me nobody else does. There's an old story about a guy named Absalom who pulled this off at scale. Never took a kingdom by force, took it by standing at the gate every single day and telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. Listened to their complaints, told them they deserved better, made every single person feel like the most important person in the room, like he was the only one who really saw them. By the time anyone realized what was happening, half the kingdom was already his, and most of them had handed it over willingly, even gratefully. Maybe in your world, it's a client who tells you you're the most talented person they've ever worked with before they've seen a single deliverable. Maybe it's an investor who skips every hard question and just keeps saying how rare this opportunity is, how lucky you are to even be having this conversation. Real partners poke holes in your idea. They ask the annoying questions, the ones that make you a little defensive because they're fair, because they actually care whether this works out. If someone's excitement feels too big, too fast, that's not a partner. That's someone steering you toward a yes before you've had time to think it through. There's that wild story in Acts about a couple, Ananias and Sapphira, who quietly held back what they'd agreed to and figured nobody would ever know, because there was no one really watching closely enough to catch it. Didn't end well for them, and the story's blunt about why. Secrecy was the actual problem, not just the money. The modern version of this just gets cagey when you ask who they answer to. Sometimes they'll dress it up in language that's hard to argue with. God told me directly. I don't need anyone's approval but his. And look, there are genuinely people who walk that close with God and mean every word of it. And I'm not trying to argue with anyone's relationship with God here. But the genuine ones are also completely fine with you checking their references. They want you to. They'll hand you 3 names before you even finish asking. The ones who get defensive about it, who treat the question like an insult to their faith, that's the information right there. And you don't need much more than that to make a decision. It's a simple test, honestly. Ask for 2 people they've worked with before, ones you can actually call. Watch how fast that question lands wrong on someone who shouldn't have a problem with it. The borrower who never pays it back. Not someone going through a rough season. That's life. You show grace there. Everyone's had a year like that. People who lent them money and quietly wrote it off as a loss because chasing it wasn't worth the relationship. Vendors who never got paid and just stopped working with them instead of making it a thing. And they'll show up at your door with a brand new idea and a great pitch, full of energy, talking about the future, talking about how different this one is going to be. And if you don't ask around first, congratulations. You're the next name on a list you didn't even know existed. There's a line attributed to Jesus that gets quoted a lot in business for good reason. Whoever's dishonest with very little will be dishonest with a lot too. There's an old story about a guy named Gehazi who lied about a small payment his boss had turned down on principle. Figured nobody would notice something that minor. Followed him the rest of his life in a way that was very hard to walk back. and it cost a lot more than the payment was ever worth. Watch how someone handles the tiny stuff. That's the preview. By the time you catch the big lie, you've already lost something you can't easily get back, and usually it's not just money. Now here's one that's specific to faith spaces, and it's honestly the one I find most uncomfortable to talk about because it can sound like I'm attacking faith itself, and that's not it at all. Some people use the language of faith to move money that doesn't add up. Pray before the meeting. Drop a verse in the pitch. Call it a move of God. Call your investment a seed you're sowing into something bigger than yourself. And somewhere underneath all that language, the actual numbers just don't check out. The returns are too good, the timeline's too vague, the paperwork's too thin, and somehow asking for clarity feels like the spiritually wrong thing to do in the moment. A deal isn't more legitimate because someone prayed over it. You'll see versions of this in church-adjacent investment groups, ministry side businesses, kingdom wealth courses that are really just funnels with extra steps and a worship playlist running in the background. If anyone ever tells you to trust God instead of signing a contract, that's not a faith thing. That's a red flag wearing a faith costume. Judas managed the money for Jesus' entire operation and was quietly skimming from it the whole time. And that same instinct, small theft, repeated quietly until it became normal, is exactly what eventually had him sell the whole thing out for a payout that, looking back, wasn't even that much. Because to them, profitable is the only question that exists, the only one that matters, the only one that's ever really on the table. They're always chasing whatever the next deal is, never satisfied with the current one. And that chasing creates an urgency that pulls you into decisions you weren't actually ready to make. Good partners can tell you why something's right. Greedy ones can only tell you it's profitable, and they get impatient if you ask for more than that. And here's number 7, the one I mentioned at the start. Picture this. You just signed papers with someone. 3 months in, you find out creditors have been calling them for a year. Payments overdue. A whole other business quietly collapsing behind the scenes. And they never said a word, not once, not even when you asked directly how things were going on their end. When someone's that deep in debt, they're not operating from vision anymore. They're operating from survival. And those are two completely different decision-making modes that look identical from the outside. A person in survival mode cuts corners on your shared project, makes reckless calls, pulls money out of your venture just to stay above water, sometimes without even fully realizing they're doing it, because survival mode doesn't feel like a choice from the inside. It feels like the only option left. There's an old story about a widow who went to a prophet for help. Her husband had died, left debt behind that wasn't even really her debt, and the creditor was about to take her sons as payment for it. Sit with that for a second. Take her sons as payment. He did help her, but only after she told him the entire situation. The tell in real life is pace. This person pushes for a fast close, gets anxious the second the deal slows down for any reason at all, even reasons that have nothing to do with them. Doesn't ask about long-term vision, only short-term cash flow, because they don't need this deal to grow. They need it to survive. And once you're in business together, their debt becomes your debt, whether you agree to that or not. So ask plainly before anything serious. Is there anything financial I should know about before we go into this together? Someone solid answers that straight, without flinching, almost relieved to be asked, because honest people generally don't mind honest questions. Someone hiding something changes the subject or laughs it off or gets a little too defensive a little too fast for a question that simple. One last thing before you go. None of this means treat everyone like a suspect. Most people you'll work with are just normal people trying to build something too. And not every red flag is actually a red flag. Sometimes it's just a person having a bad week or a bad month. This is a list for paying attention, not a reason to get paranoid. And there's a real difference between the two. Paranoia trusts nobody. Attention just asks questions and actually listens to the answers, then makes a decision based on what it hears instead of how the conversation felt in the moment. And nobody on this list is stuck being who they are forever. People grow out of this stuff. Character isn't fixed. People change more than we give them credit for. The flatterer can learn to sit with silence instead of filling it with compliments. The greedy partner can come back around to caring how, not just how much. It's just worth knowing the pattern before you hand someone the keys to what you're building, because by the time it's obvious, it's usually already expensive, and the cost is rarely only money.